being with us today as we discuss the Owasco Watershed Lake Association. Ken Kudla is here, a past president of OWLA and a very dynamic member of the board, doing a lot with education remediation projects within the watershed. And I'm Ann Robson, the current president. And we are in planning stages for the 2024 Bob Brower Scientific Symposium in plain English. This year's theme is Our Lake, Our Legacy. There is a concern with climate change in our area and how it's impacting the quality of our water with climbing temperatures and violent rain events, harmful algal bloom. There are a lot of factors that are impacting how we are using our lake.
And they're changing quickly. It's not that they're that they haven't been a problem, but lately they're getting much more aggressive.
They are, and there needs to be a resiliency in how we are looking at these concerns and problems. The Bob Brower Scientific Symposium plans to bring research and knowledge from the professionals within our community to talk about these concerns. And I'm very pleased with the dynamic speakers that we have. And Ken, you are one of those speakers here talking about our freshwater resources. So what are some of the things you found?
Well, it's been interesting. And I encourage all of you to just go online if you'd like and Google freshwater, and you'll find out a lot of interesting information. I'll share a little bit with you today. Just some simple things. 71% of the earth is covered in water. Okay, so that's pretty cool. But 97.5% of that water is salt water, and only 2.5% is fresh water. So think about that. So only 2.5% of all the water in the world is fresh water. But of that 2.5% fresh water, well, where is it? Can I get at it? Well, 69% of it is in glaciers and ice packs and snow packs around the world, so that's really not accessible. 29% of it is in groundwater, or 30% is in groundwater. That leaves only about 1% of all the fresh water in the world that's really available for us to use, which is fascinating to think about when you think about how much water it is in the world. The other interesting thing about the water is that there's a lot of water when you think about it, but 21% of all the fresh water in the world is in the Great Lakes Basin. So this area that we live in, Lake Huron, Lake Superior, Lake Ontario, that's 21% of all the fresh water in the world. That's a lot of water. It's about 6 quadrillion gallons of water in the lakes that make up the Great Lakes Basin. That's enough water to cover the entire United States in about 10 feet of water. That's how much water that is. It also represents about 95% of all the fresh water in the United States. So think about where those lakes are. There's only about 8 states that touch those lakes, but they have access to 95% of all the fresh water in the country. So now you know why there's so many issues with fresh water out west. Because they don't have access to that amount of fresh water. So when you start to think about it, so you got 42 states that have to deal with 5% of the water. So I started looking back into the Great Lakes Basin in this notion of 21% of all the fresh water in the world, and why we should care about it. Well, let's just take a quick second and talk about some fun stuff. How do we use it? And I have a whole list of things that we do and what you do with your water. Use about 3 gallons of water if you shave with the faucet running. Use about 5 gallons of water to brush your teeth. Use about 10 gallons of water to wash your dishes. Use about 30 gallons of water to wash clothes. Use about 40 gallons of water to take a bath. But then there's a couple of really kind of fun ones. One is, if you have a leaky toilet, and we've all experienced leaky toilets, a leaky toilet can waste about 22,000 gallons of water in a year. That's enough for you to take 3 baths every day. The other one that's kind of fun is the idea of watering your lawn. There's 10 million acres of lawns in the United States, and that requires 270 billion gallons of water every week. That's enough water to give every person in the world a shower for 4 days in a row. So think about how much water that is. So that's, so there's an awful lot of fun things that go on with talking about the water itself, but then you have to think about where does it come from? Well, those lakes reside in something called a watershed. It's 295,000 square miles, and it's the land that surrounds those lakes. It's the largest watershed in the world. It included in those with those lakes is the Finger Lakes. We are part of the Great Lakes Basin. So that means that every drop of water that falls into the basin ultimately ends up in those lakes, which to me was kind of fascinating.
So like a basin, is this like a bowl then, a watershed? Is that how you think of it with the water? Because where does the water end? Where do the clouds, where do the storms end? It's how the water falls down onto the earth and works its way through the earth covering, the land use.
Exactly. That's exactly how, a simple way to put it is the land sheds the water into whatever the surrounding water bodies are, whether it's a river or a lake or a stream. I think that's another thing that we get a lot of questions about is, well, I don't live on the lake. Why do I care about the lake?
The Owasco Watershed Lake Association formed in 1988 with a group of concerned local community citizens and residents. And our group has evolved over the decades to address concerns within the watershed. Land use is important, understanding what a watershed is. Cyanobacteria has caused a lot of new programs to be installed. One that OWLA does is the harmful algal bloom surveillance, the monitoring of the lake during the summer. The Owasco Watershed Lake Association volunteers do tributary sampling to look at nutrients that are flowing into the lake. We are involved with the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid campaign, looking at the critical ravines within the watershed. If we lose those trees, we are losing the root system that's holding the soil onto the hillside. So there's so many things that are non-point concerns with the use of our watershed. OWLA has been making it a priority to raise funds to deal with some of these concerns. And as you mentioned, we think about the water at the tap, but a lot has to go prior to that in looking at the raw water source and what needs to be done to treat the water.
Yeah, if you look at Owasco Lake as an example, the lake is 11 square miles, but the watershed is 208 square miles. So every drop of water that falls in those 208 square miles ultimately ends up in the lake.
Yes, and it's not pointing fingers at anyone in what they're doing within the watershed. We're all involved, and this is why it's called that non-point source concern, and everyone should be taking that ownership to become a steward, to protect what they have within their own backyard.
And it's not just us. Owasco Lake, they say it turns over every 4 years. Basically what that means is every 4 years all of the water that was in the lake is gone and has gotten replaced by new water. That's 212 billion gallons of water. So what happens to that 4 years worth of water? Well, it goes down through the outlet, down through Port Byron and Baldwinsville, and ultimately ends up in Lake Ontario. So every 4 years we dump 212 billion gallons of water from Owasco Lake into Lake Ontario. And the other interesting part about that is as it's going to Lake Ontario, it picks up other stuff. So it's not just what was left in the lake, it's what picks up on its journey to ultimately dump into Lake Ontario, where only 1% of the water leaves through the St. Lawrence River. So it pretty much just stays there. So think about that for a second when you start to think about what you're doing in the watershed that affects the water in the lake.
So true. And being part of OWLA, the Owasco Watershed Lake Association, we're building awareness of these concerns and how there's an intrinsic value to our quality of life because of this finite resource that we have here, and something not to be taken for granted. We're very pleased with the interest of our community to get involved, and there's so many different ways of being involved with OWLA. The Bob Brower Scientific Symposium is one. We go into classrooms looking to inform our future generations about the importance of land use, land cover, watershed, impactment. So, many ways for folks to learn more about what is happening and to get involved in protecting this resource. We are part of a much bigger picture, but we hold a very important part of that larger picture in how we are managing our life, the way we use our landscape, if we're using fertilizers, if we use a lot of salt, so many different factors here to be aware of. And OWLA is constantly looking at strategic ways to be able to address these upcoming concerns. So we've come a long way in 36 years from the point source concern of tertiary treatment of wastewater sewage facilities to now cyanobacteria and HABs and the toxicity of water. A HAB bloom, we're trying to alert individuals to be able to recognize it and avoid it and to report it. It can cause the gamut of a skin rash, but too much of being exposed to the cyanobacteria can be very harmful and even could cause death. So a lot to be concerned about. That this is our reality now. It is something that will be with us, and we have to become more resilient in our methods and our day-to-day living experiences to manage that.
One of the things Ann always talks about is when her and I are talking about this, this can't be the new normal. We've got to address what's happening now because it's happening so much more quickly than it has in the past. And we have to get more people actively involved in taking care of the land so that it takes care of the water.
It is a sad state of affairs, you're right. If you cannot go swimming, if you go down to the lake and you cannot go into the lake, it is a change. And OWLA does put a lot of emphasis into education and a lot into remediation, but OWLA also is looking at policy and rules and regulations and what do we need to do as a community and getting all of these stakeholders together to address the concerns. And it's an ever-evolving situation. We're most fortunate to have the interest and commitment of our county, our city, townships, the DEC, Department of Health, Ag and Markets. We're all looking at trying to preserve and continue with having quality water that brings life to our community.
As Ann was saying, we don't do this by ourselves. I mean, we work with a lot of partners, a lot of the lake associations, a lot of government agencies. They determine what needs to get done, and then they'll come to us and we'll volunteer to do HAB surveillance, to do tributary sampling, to do sea slab sampling out in the middle of the lake. So that's the reason that we do those is not for us. We do that because there's interesting organizations throughout New York State that are doing specific things to try to find out specific information, and we gather the data for them that they can use to make decisions about.
Yes, we have trainings available. We call ourselves the citizen scientists to do this work, and we are the feet on the ground, the dirty boots, the hands into the mud, so to speak. But there's a lot that OWLA can do. We are a volunteer organization, a membership organization with annual dues, but the monies that we get from our members, as well as looking at grants and other foundations for funding, we're able to fund many of the remediation projects that we do, and very proud of all that we have done for our community and for our future generations.
One of the things that Ann always talks about is we are not the regulatory agency. We don't have the authority to regulate anything. Basically, that belongs to the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council. They're the agency that monitors the lake and makes regulations and works to make sure they're adhered to. We do a lot of work with the Management Council throughout the year, but only when they come to us and they need help or need assistance. That's how we get involved in the work that they're doing. And one of the things that you started is this notion of something called a watershed steward. And if you could take me through that again, that would be great, and it would be very helpful to the people that are going to listen to this, because it's a kind of change in direction of what we've done in the past. We've kind of been worried about the water, and now with Ann in charge, we're kind of worried about what we call the shed, the watershed.
The watershed, and that is so important. Ken, our behavior and how we prioritize what we do, very important. The decisions that we make with how we're maintaining our lawn and the amount of water that we use. Are we conservative? Just can't turn on the water and just let it flow. It's expensive to be able to prepare our water to become potable. So being a watershed steward, everyone is involved in making good decisions of land use and land cover. If you are doing construction, you want to put up some sort of straw or berm so that soil stays on the ground. If you can put a cover over it. Many farmers now are doing winter cover crops, which we're finding is reducing the amount of erosion and soil that is blown around in the wintertime. So being a good steward with that is a very important thing. So yes, it's something that everyone can take responsibility for, ownership for, and just to take the time to protect this resource. It's finite, and we are so fortunate to have so much fresh water, within several hundreds of miles from us that we just naturally take it for granted. Yet we need to get beyond that and realize how precious this is, and how so many states within our nation are relying on the quality of water. It is, industry is needing it, in particular agriculture. 70% of the water use is used in agriculture, and for health, and so a lot of reasons.
The interesting thing that's driving a lot of this change that Ann has been leading is the feedback that we get from people when we try to get them to join the Lake Association. As I said earlier, people like to just brush it off and say, well, I don't live on the lake, And so this idea now of, well, maybe you don't live on the lake, but you still drink water. And there's a finite amount of it, and you've really got to be careful. So under Ann's leadership, she's changed really the direction that our website is taking, and it's much more about be watershed aware, watershed stewardship, take care of the land, because that affects the water. Once the water's in the lake, it's in the lake. So we have to take care of it before it gets there. So as you go on, there's a couple of things you can do. You can go to something called the Lake Friendly Living website, and you can Google that, and it'll give you some idea of what a lot of the other lake associations are doing relative to freshwater quality. So, and then the other thing is, under Ann's direction, we're redoing the website, as I said, and there will be a lot more information in there about watershed stewardship and more specifics on exactly some of the volunteer things that OWLA is doing to help all these organizations that are working so diligently to fix the lake. How are we helping them? What are we doing? What kind of volunteers do we need? Why is it important for you to become an OWLA member? We have about 400 members.
And growing.
And we like to say that we need your voice. We need you to join us because we need you to tell us what you're thinking, what you think needs to be done. And it's one thing to do it on your own at one person, but when you get 400 people agreeing with you, and then that's carried forward, that makes a lot of difference when you're looking for grants and looking to influence government organizations that are working on the lake.
Thank you, Ken. Those are some excellent points to take home.
I guess in closing, there's probably a few things that Ann and I would really like you to remember. One is this idea of watershed awareness. You've just got to be aware of the land around the lake and that you work and interact with every day, because it doesn't just affect you, it affects millions and millions of other people that draw water from the lake. And then join us.
Join us.
Add your voice. Let us know what you're thinking. What do you think needs to get done? Do you have a different perspective? Great. That's what we're interested in hearing.
We are. We're all becoming more resilient, trying to cope and address the impact of climate change. This is a whole new environment that we're dealing with. Chemistry of the lake is changing, and that resiliency, how do we respond? What can we do within our own backyard? Even if it's a rain garden, if it's how we are landscaping our area, there's just so much that we can be doing. And our strength is in our voices. We appreciate the members that we have. We're always building our membership base and encourage that you participate in our public forums, get on our mailing list for our e-newsletters, participate and register for the Bob Brower Scientific Symposium. All these different avenues that we have to get the information out there and to build awareness of our precious resource.